terms, and we ought to be speaking in those absolute terms, and that means every available option that this government has at its disposal ought to be considered, and indeed is being considered.
Congressman John Sweeney, as your fellow congressmen have said, necessary and appropriate force still to be determined. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Jonathan?
The search for suspects in connection with the attack against New York and Washington is worldwide, but the list of suspects is narrow, pointing sharply at just one man, Osama bin Laden. CNN national correspondent Mike Betcher looks now at the man behind the headlines and the reasons behind the suspicions.
Swirling amid the clouds of smoke billowing from these symbols of power, the terrible question: who could be behind such a devastating act of terrorism? Though the evidence is still being examined, one name tops the list of suspects. It's a name that's been on the FBI's 10 most wanted list since 1999, Osama bin Laden. The 44-year-old bin Laden, through a spokesman, denies any involvement, but U.S. intelligence agencies say his fingerprints are unmistakable. In Western intelligence circles, bin Laden has been well known for years for this document, a call for jihad, or holy war. Bin Laden discussed that call to arms in his first ever television interview with CNN in 1997.
We declared a jihad, a holy war, against the United States government, because it is unjust, criminal, and tyrannical.
You know, the man is ruthless, and, you know, he believes that he should declare war against the United States. And this kind of appeal, this kind of call actually appealed to many young Muslims all over the world.
But Osama bin Laden doesn't come from a family of extremists. He was born the son of a billionaire Saudi businessman, the 17th of 52 children, some of whom live in the United States. His father built the largest construction business in Saudi Arabia. Osama joined the family operation at a young age, developing an expertise in demolition. But in 1979, the religious 23-year-old left his comfortable life and took a radical turn. That year, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and bin Laden joined the Afghan opposition, offering money, equipment, and know-how. By 1986, bin Laden was running training camps and leading his own troops into battle. When the war ended, bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda, a multinational terrorist network. Its members used the most up-to-date technology, satellite phone, email, fax, to coordinate their activities from all over the world. It drew thousands of volunteers.
They are either direct followers, taking direct command and order from bin Laden, or they are small cells and groups who believe bin Laden is a godfather. His message is almost like a religious order.
When the Gulf War broke out in 1990, an outraged bin Laden began to target a new enemy, America. He declared a holy war against his new enemy and a set of demands that hold to this day. Bin Laden wants U.S. troops out of Saudi Arabia. He opposes U.S. bombing campaigns in Iraq. He is against U.S. support of Israel, and he objects to U.S. backing of Arab nations he deems un-Islamic, such as Egypt.
The U.S. government has committed acts that are extremely unjust, hideous, and criminal through its support of the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And we believe the U.S. is directly responsible for those killed in Palestine, Lebanon, and Iraq.
In the next decade, Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda organization would be implicated in a series of attacks on Americans at home and abroad. In 1992, the first American victims, 18 servicemen killed in Somalia, a Muslim nation embroiled in famine and civil war. Bin Laden admitted his involvement to CNN.
With Allah's grace, Muslims in Somalia cooperated with some Arab holy warriors who were in Afghanistan. Together, they killed large numbers of American occupation troops.
1993, a bomb at the World Trade Center. 6 people killed and thousands injured. Bin Laden denies any involvement, but he was named one of many unindicted co-conspirators. 1995, 1996, bin Laden possibly linked to 2 bombings in Saudi Arabia. 24 U.S. troops dead. 1998, bombs at 2 U.S. embassies in Africa killed 224 people. Bin Laden has been indicted as the mastermind behind the attack. 2000, the bombing of the USS Cole kills 17 U.S. sailors. Osama bin Laden is the principal focus of the investigation. 2001, bin Laden is now suspect #1 in the worst terrorism act in modern history. A series of attacks that came without warning. But there may have been a hint in this videotape, which was circulating throughout the Middle East and on the internet this summer. It shows bin Laden training young militants, some who seem as young as 11, for his holy war. Bin Laden makes an impassioned plea for recruits in the 2-hour tape. It also indicates bin Laden is planning additional anti-American operations. For the last several years, bin Laden is believed to be in hiding in the remote mountains in Afghanistan, where he is beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. The country is dominated by the Taliban, a movement of religious students turned warriors who have imposed their harsh interpretation of Islam. The Taliban have declared that bin Laden is their guest, providing he does not attack other nations. In 1997, bin Laden tried to explain the logic behind his tactics.
The US today has set a double standard, calling whoever goes against its injustice a terrorist. It wants to occupy our countries, steal our resources, impose agents on us to rule us, and then wants us to agree to all this. If we refuse to do so, it says we are terrorists.
And he made clear he had no intention of changing his ways or his future plans.
You'll see them and hear about them in the media, God willing.
If the West acts against Osama bin Laden one way or another, Arab nations, Muslim nations will have to respond. For perspective on that, we're joined now by the editor of the Arabic language newspaper Al-Quds, Abdel Bari Atwan. He joins us now from our London studios. Let me ask you, first of all, since you and your newspaper heard rumors of these attacks some weeks before they were carried out, what, if anything, you're hearing now?
What we are hearing, actually, the Arab people start to question, the wisdom of the American foreign policies, and they believe, the Americans actually are paying a heavy price for their unjust foreign policies, and they would like, a new page of cooperation between Arab and the United States based on justice, based on more understanding, based on implementation of UN Security Council resolutions, and, stop the sanctions against Arab and treat everybody in the world and fairly basis as equal.
Let me jump in and ask you this: the things that you've mentioned are demands, they are requests, they are complaints that have been made of U.S. international policy before Tuesday. But Tuesday, everything changed. What does the Arab world expect? What does the Arab world want to see from the U.S. response to what happened Tuesday?
Now, United States is working very hard to establish a coalition, exactly the same one like what it has established during the Gulf War. Now they are asking Arab and Muslim countries to join this coalition. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, maybe other Arabs. It seems there is a military preparation or a preparation for a military action against Afghanistan. So, but the problem is, how these Arab governments will convince its people that they are going to fight a fellow other Arab Muslims or Muslim country. So, and what price? Are they, the American will listen this time to the Arab demands to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict, to treat them in better way, to stop humiliating of the Arab people and Arab governments, to listen to their friends in the Middle East, to seek their advice. This is what we are hearing in the Arab world. Said, okay, military preparation, they want the Arab and the Muslim to participate this time. It is different from Kuwait. We were promised by the American, by the President Bush, the senior at that time, that he will have a peace conference and there wouldn't be any war in the Middle East. Now we are witnessing a war in the Middle East. Now that we are back to the square one. No peace process, and no American involvement.
And let me point out another way that it is different from Kuwait. You rightly point out that this is not Kuwait. Kuwait was one nation. We heard the U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell say that the military action would not be limited to one place, that the United States and its allies would go against terrorists wherever they are, wherever they threaten Western citizens. What's going to happen if the U.S. and its allies really do that?
Well, actually, I don't know. I had some American military expert or ex-military, personnel, high-ranking personnel, actually were talking about attacking Iraq, attacking Afghanistan, attacking Iran. So I don't know what the wisdom behind this. Is the American going to launch a war against the whole of the great chunk of Middle East, and who will support them there, and at what purposes? Until now, we don't have a concrete evidence that Osama bin Laden or a certain Islamic group behind this attacks. But even so, you can't go and destroy other Arab countries. You have to understand the resentment in the Arab world against the American foreign policies because of these kind of irrational attacks. The sanction against Iraq, the bombarding of Iraq, encourage those radicals, encourage those extremists to target the United States as the number one enemy, as a target of terrorism. So I believe, any further attacks, it will make the situation worse and worse. I believe that America should be more rational and more patient.
We thank you so much for talking with us. Carol.
Jonathan, hundreds of Arab Americans were actually injured or killed in the collapse of the World Trade Center, as were so many other nationalities. Yesterday, I heard a radio report of a man trying to run down a Pakistani-American woman in a shopping mall parking lot. He was screaming at her to go home. So the question we asked this morning is history repeating itself? Arab Americans, and we do mean Arab Americans, are experiencing the same kind of backlash that struck at Japanese Americans after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Vigilantes targeted German Americans after World War II. Velma Gutierrez reports.
December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor.
Absolute shock to think that our country was attacked.
September 11th, 2001, New York, Washington, Pennsylvania.
I felt that my country has been attacked.
These are among the darkest moments in America's history.
They blamed us for the war. The gardeners are working and kids will go by, driving by, and throw a bottle at them, and people spat on them and, call them dirty Japs.
History has a way of repeating itself.
Muslims, Arabs, people who look remotely Arab, who may be from somewhere else in the Middle East, in New York, pulled out of cabs, beaten. An Islamic center in Texas had its windows shot out.
Like other Japanese Americans, Bob and Sumi Hayamitsu lived through it all 60 years ago. They say this is what happens when the perpetrators look like you.
Even our government classified us as aliens.
Bob, Sumi, and thousands of other Americans were rounded up and placed in war relocation camps.
You might call it a concentration camp because it had barbed wires, guard sentry towers with the machine guns turned inward.
Dr. Jasser Hattout says he can't imagine that happening at all. It's so un-American.
I'm not another entity. I am American. I know no other country. Squeeze my hands real tight. Squeeze.
Dr. Hattout is a neuroradiologist at the VA hospital in Los Angeles.
Now give me a real big smile. Show me your teeth. Real big.
They're not mine.
All right.
79-year-old Edward Jackson is his patient. Jackson is a World War II veteran. He was a POW. He remembers the anti-Japanese sentiment, but thought it was wrong.
I came from a very poor family. And my friends in high school were the Japanese, the Chinese, and the blacks.
Jackson says some people are lashing out again.
I heard somebody say, boy, I wish I could run across one of those Arabs. I'd shoot the son of a bitch. That's what I heard today at this hospital, And that's terrible.
Let's not be barbaric. Let's be human beings and treat the others as human beings.
A principle all three of these Americans, Jackson, Hayamitsu, and Hattout, all believe in. Thelma Gutierrez, CNN, Los Angeles.
CNN's continuing coverage goes on right now. I'm Carol Lynn.
And I'm Jonathan Mann. Stay with us.